So what I'm going to do today is talk about how the second mind appears as the world, the apparently physicalized world of locality. All right, so let's take this second mind, which we can call is the potential state. All right. Now this second mind and its potential state differentiates and is what appears as the first mind. All right. This, if you've been watching the other videos in the series, you'll be familiar with this idea. So the second mind, the potential state, the non-local, undifferentiated nature, what we might call consciousness, this differentiates through creating boundaries, through localizing as the first mind, which is what you experience as an individual, what I experience as the individual Anup. This first mind, you will see, always exists in relationship with an object. Right? So this might be me as Anup seeing, for example, this paper in front of me. This might be you hearing these words. This might be you seeing this pen. Right? The first mind always exists as an observer in relationship with an object of its observation. All right, this can be an emotion, this can be happiness, it can be anger, right? It could be a tree, it could be an atom, right? The concept of an atom, or the diagram of an atom, right? Either way, it's always in relationship with a first mind, a localized sense of identity, and it's always through a medium, which I'll call the interface, right? And in most cases, this interface is space. So it is the mind perceiving an object in this medium of space, which is the interface. In Vedanta, this is called the experiencer, this is called the experienced object, and this is called the process of experiencing. So here we have the localized first mind in relationship with an object through the medium of space. And interface, here is the correct word. It actually faces both directions. It's interfacing, facing between these two. All right, that's what we might interface, and we can say that's space. So what we have here then is the experience of an object and the experience of a localized identity as a result of this localizing function, right? This potential state that is fluxing starts to localize as this experience of both the experiencing observer, the observed object, and that interface, which is space. In fact, space, this interfacing substance, space can only be experienced when you have 2 points, right? The interval between 2 points is what we call space. So here, as this localizing function creates this experience of a first mind and its object, the interval between that, the relationship between that, is what we experience as space. So what does this mean? This means that the fundamental unit of the world is an experience. Right? The fundamental of the unit is not just an atom, because an atom is perceived as such only in relationship with the mind that perceives it, right? The atom, through an interface, is experienced by the first mind. This interface can be mathematics, right? I think it was Dalton who came up with the theory of atoms, and with the concept of atoms, and he did that because he observed substances that were in particular ratios. So in this interface then would be the concept of ratios, would be mathematics, and would be space. That's the interfacing medium through which the atom is recognized and through which the mind recognizes the atom, the first mind, the localized mind. All right? So the atom is not independently existing, it exists as part of this experience. Experiences, M-I-O, the first mind, experience an object through the interface. These are the fundamental units of the world. All right, this is what we call a world. All right, so as you look around the room you're in right now, notice the objects. These objects that you are noting appear as they appear only in relationship with your mind. right? This object, let's say this is this pen, which you're seeing now, right? This pen, through the interfacing medium of space, in this case also virtual space, what happens? According to the first mind relationship, remember this is the first mind domain we're talking about. What happens is the ambient light reflects off of what we call a pen, right? It is not actually a pen, it's the differentiated aspect of the second mind, but let's call it a pen to go with the story. It reflects off of this through this interfacing medium of space and arrives at the brain interprets it, and the first mind then experiences pen, right? So this pen is necessarily in relationship with this mind that perceives it. And that's why we can never nail down what exactly an object is, because it changes according to how we perceive it. This is an experience, and these are the building blocks of the world, of the universe, of the cosmos. Right? So when we want to know what a pen is, right? I want to know what a pen is. What do? Well, we see the pen, and I say, I want to know what it is, so I break it up into parts, right? I look at, here's the tip of it, and then I might say, well, inside is some ink, and then here's the plastic container, but then I keep breaking it down into smaller and smaller pieces because I want to know what it is. And ultimately, I'm going to arrive at atoms, right? Nucleus and some electrons in the orbitals, right? But then even that atom is exhibiting this boundary condition of the pen, this boundary condition here that is caused by the localizing second mind. Okay, let's go into this a little bit more. It's a little technical, but let's go into it a little bit more. So this localizing function, this potential state which localizes, this in Vedanta is called Maya, the localizing function. Maya means that which is not and yet appears to be. That which exists not independently, but exists relatively, exists dependently. All right? And we see that's the case because this unbounded state of the second mind, we can imagine that this paper is the second mind. All right? This unbounded state then starts to localize and creates this boundary. Right? This paper as such has no boundary. But now we've created a boundary around what is experienced as an individual and what is experienced as an object. So this localizing function, that which is not this boundary but yet appears, that is Maya. And Maya has two essential powers. One is the Avarana Shakti, which is the veiling power, and one is the Vikshepa Shakti, or the projecting power. Okay, the veiling power operates in this direction. This Maya, this localizing tendency, veils the non-local, veils this potential state. The projecting power projects the boundary and creates distinct things, like this particular mind, this particular body, this pen, right? All of these things have become the object of observation in relationship to this unitary sense of identity. Okay, so the veiling power veils the second mind, which is why in our society we don't talk about the second mind much. When we talk about consciousness, we always think of it in this sense. We never think about consciousness in this sense, at least usually in formal studies in science, right? It's always talked about as this individual thing that is the result of a brain. But in fact, even that brain that we know of is here and is relating to some form of unitary awareness. Both of them have in common this boundary condition, which is creating this experience of space as well, or co-creates this experience of space. So this localizing function of Maya both veils and projects, which creates this experience of boundedness. Right? So now coming back here, when we want to know what something is, what do? We keep breaking it down. And now the pen has smaller parts. We get down to the atomic level. Then we finally get down to the elementary particle. And then what we find in physics, what is the elementary particle? The elementary particle is a vibrational pattern of an entire field. What is the field that we're talking about? This second mind. This is the field. A particular aspect of it vibrates, and that is what we experience as an elementary particle, right? Now, how do we know about the elementary particle? How do we know about the localizing vibration? Because even that is known through the interfacing medium to the first mind. Because we're starting to recognize that this is in relationship with the observer. What we're doing is we're moving from this unbounded state of the second mind, and we are apparently creating this localized vibration, this localized particle. This is moving from the non-local to the local, right? This is the quantum principle of non-locality, right? So such that here in this broader second mind, right? This broader second mind, a localized vibration is what we call an elementary particle. Okay, and now as long as we're talking about this particle, we're now talking about it in relationship with another local pattern, which is the first mind. Right? And as soon as you have these patterns, you have to create something for that medium, and this is what we experience as space. All right, what are all of these essentially? They are the second mind. And this movement, here is the process of going from the non-local to the local. So when we talk about entanglement, right? Remember, this is the second mind here. The quantum principle of entanglement says that you have one particle on one side of the world, and you have another particle on one side of the world, and their behavior correlates, right? When one thing happens here, another thing, a complementary action happens here, right? Now, how is that? If these are separated by halfway across the Earth, how could that be possible that this particle would correlate with that? In fact, it seems to happen at faster than the speed of light, and nothing apparently can move faster than light. So how could it be? Well, it's because that Earth is not this thing, physical thing in between, but rather this particle and this particle. What are these particles after all? They are vibrations in this broader field, right? So it's not surprising at all that these could correlate instantaneously, not just faster than light, but instantaneously, because they are not different, right? Just as if you have a light source that is shining, like a projector in a movie screen, and in this movie you have a few different characters, right? And the characters are doing different things, but they're coordinated. This one throws a ball and this one seems to catch it, right? Or this one smiles and this one smiles instantaneously. How is that possible, right? What if we show this character is on one side of the earth in the United States and this character is in India on the other side of the globe, right? And we show a split screen. And on the split screen in the movie, this one smiles and this one smiles instantaneously. How can they be correlated? Well, of course, there's a script and they might know to do that. But the other way to recognize that is that this is one and the same light, which is showing and localizing as the boundary condition that is this individual and this individual. So these can be instantaneously correlating because not just their source is the same, but their essential nature is the same. It is this light which is appearing as these characters. So similarly, these particles, these vibrations in this field are of the same nature, of the same material, we might say, or of the same non-material, which is this second mind, all right, or undifferentiated, non-local consciousness. All right, so now this is not accepted by physics in the sense that consciousness is still thought of as something that is created in here, right? The idea of the observer is accepted. The idea of the observed object is accepted. The idea of an observing process even is accepted. But for most people, we're still stuck on this idea that this observer, if we're talking about a living person or a conscious person, has a brain and within this brain it produces something called consciousness. But we're inverting that, and we're saying that consciousness is this fundamental non-local material or non-material, which localizes through Maya, which veils its original nature as a result of the localization and projects these boundaries or these vibrational patterns, which gives us the experience of this three-dimensional world. So if we want to know what is an elementary particle, what are these apparent building blocks, what we have to do is we have to go beyond this boundary, and we're already doing that. We're already going beyond this boundary. That's why we're no longer saying a particle is like this, but a particle may actually be like this. It may be a kind of vibration. So we are, this boundary which was so harsh, it's being broken up. We're starting to see through that harsh or concretized boundary. What does this mean? It means we're moving in this direction. This is the direction. This is the direction of integration. This is the direction of differentiation, right? As we are delocalizing, we're moving on this axis. We're moving in this direction towards the second mind, and the boundaries are starting to dissolve. As we look at the physicalized world, we concretize the boundaries. Right? So Maya is an essential concept and experience to recognize. Right? Maya is projecting the boundary experience. So this is the mechanics of how the second mind differentiates into the first mind, the observing interface, or the interface, and the object. This is the fundamental unit of experience, and these are what we call the world. Now we can describe this more, this localizing function of Maya. How does it localize? We can say that it is through a fractal pattern. Right? It is through a fractal pattern, because you will see that this potential state, this infinity, shows up everywhere. If this is actually infinite, then no matter what it does and what it shows, that too will be infinite, right? Infinity can't actually be divided. So when there is this apparent boundary, this first mind also will reflect infinity. The interfacing medium will show infinity. The object will show infinity. All right? How is that? Well, there are innumerable objects. Right? That's one way to consider infinity. There are infinite objects. There's no limit to the number of thoughts, the number of emotions, the number of objects in the world, the number of perceptions. That's one way. The other thing is, it also becomes fractal. There's a nested hierarchy to this. So one object could be, we could say, let's do this over here, get some more room. All right, one object could be, let's say, the Milky Way Galaxy, right? It's a galaxy. Now, if you look within that galaxy, you might say you might have a solar system. Now you have a solar system, right? Notice it looks very similar to an atom. But you go within that solar system, and you have Earth, right? And of course you have many such planets, but you have Earth. And you go within Earth, and you have a continent, right? And you go with that, and so on. You keep going down. Eventually, you will get down to the level of organisms, or what we call objects. And eventually, you get down to a cell. Then within the cell, you have molecules, and then you have an atom, right? And then we're back to an elementary particle. So what you're seeing is these nested patterns. This is basically opening up a new world. You look here, you've opened up a new world. Look here, opened up a new world. So this nested fractal pattern is what we see. And finally, we get down to the elementary particle, and we want to know what it is. What we ultimately have to do is simply de-boundarize it. I don't know if that's a word, But that's when we see that it's actually a vibration that is a part of this entire sheet of paper, this second mind, right? And it's here. We can't draw it because it can't be localized. And again, this second mind itself is what, as it creates boundaries, we get a galaxy, or it doesn't have to start there. We're not saying that it goes in this order. It also goes like this. It's a bidirectional process. All right, so this second mind crystallizes, as it were, the potential crystallizes through its vibrational nature as what we call objects, but these are always in relationship to a perceiving first mind. And so on. All right, so all of this is held in the awareness and as the localizing awareness of the second mind. All right, so I'm sure many questions will arise from this. So if there are questions, let me know and we will answer them. One more thing to note is that, is this a mind or is this not a mind, right? Physics might call this the unified field. So be it. Whoops, unified field, right? Mathematics might call it infinity. So be it. A religious person might call it God. So be it. Spiritual person might call it consciousness. So be it. Philosopher might call it truth or reality. It doesn't really matter. What matters is recognizing the pattern here, recognizing what is happening here. Now, I call it mind because this is our own nature as individuals, and because this is something that the individual, through the process of introspection, can begin to recognize, the individual can begin to recognize the nature of the boundary, right? And can begin to recognize the dissolving of that boundary, and can begin to recognize the second mind, which crystallizes and fractalizes as the boundaries and nested objects that are the world. All right, so because that can be experienced, because this is noted by pretty much every wisdom tradition of the world, because can be experienced by us, I call it mind. This is for us to experiment with and see what happens.